Elon Musk can't topple the system. And the other thing is that no matter what you think of Trump, he has served in public life. He has built a business. Yes, he's erratic in his decision making, but he's pretty steady Eddie in his personal life and in what he believes in, whereas Musk is all over the map.
And do you think Musk will actually now be worried about the possibility of being deported back to South Africa, as Trump has put it?
Well, I don't know. He's also got Canadian citizenship, so he can just move north if he wants to do that by virtue of his mother. So I don't know where is he going to deport him to, Canada or South Africa? The point is, the guy is an international businessman. He can operate out of his back pocket from an island in the middle of nowhere if he wants to. So it doesn't impede him. It's just I cannot believe that Trump would even try and do that.
Hello and welcome to the Trump Report. I'm Louis Sykes. Today we're going to be speaking to Diane Francis, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council in Washington, Editor-at-Large with the National Post newspaper and author of her best-selling Substack, which has regular updates on geopolitics and US politics. And we're going to be discussing with her this ongoing feud between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Trump's threats to possibly cut funding for some of Elon Musk's companies, possibly to also deport Elon Musk himself, where to we actually find out it might not be South Africa, it could even be Canada. On top of that, we're also going to be discussing Trump's possible pivot or shift on the war in Ukraine, his less favorable language towards Putin and what that means for that conflict, and of course the Trump administration. So remember, if you're watching us on YouTube, you should subscribe and sign up for a membership, but you may well be listening to us and you can get us on the Trump Report podcast on your favorite podcast outlet. Diane Francis, thank you very much for joining me again.
Always fun.
I wanted to start on a domestic US issue with you first, Diane. This spat between Trump and Elon Musk, which has resumed again. The latest is Trump seems to be threatening to look at deporting the head of Doge and his former ally. What should we make of this?
Well, it's gloves off. This is the billionaire breakup. It's really ugly, and it's going to get uglier. And, just playing parlor psychologist, these guys were raised by very abusive fathers, and they're now invoking those fathers against one another. It is brutal. And it's very, nasty. So we'll see where it goes. But, it was an uneasy friendship in the first place. And I think there's going to be a lot of blood on the floor when this cage match is finished.
And Trump, as part of those threats, has threatened again to as he termed it, turn Doge-style cuts on SpaceX and Tesla contracts and subsidies, businesses owned and run by Elon Musk. There is actually some quite crucial work being done by those companies, especially SpaceX. Is Trump determined enough to follow through with that threat, do you think, or is this just a war of words?
Well, I think that, Musk is, like a lot of big businesses in the United States, is very, very dependent on government contracts. He in particular, because of SpaceX, that's all they have is government contracts, and he and Bezos are vying for those contracts all the time. So there are ways that he can be very much damaged if Trump wants to do that. I don't think he would be vindictive in specific cases, but I think that what he will be doing is he will be sending auditors to re-examine all the contracts and all the benefits that Musk gets out of the government. Not, partly out of spite, but probably makes sense anyway.
And a lot of this disagreement is between the two men is about Trump's big, beautiful bill, which seems to have turned into a real political dogfight. What happens if Trump can't get this bill passed?
Well, I think he will get something passed. He may not get what he wants, but the underlying reason between this fight is that they're both on the right-hand side of the road, politically speaking. But Musk is much more right-hand. In other words, he borders on libertarian. And he sees this big, beautiful bill as a menace and a threat to the U.S. dollar and American solvency. And he's not exactly wrong. I mean, they're looking at that. It looks like $3 trillion more to the debt. And then that will continue to pile up as he gives more and more tax breaks to rich people. And then he's taking away benefits from poor people. And this also is offensive to a lot of people. And while Musk has left the Democratic Party, he was a Democrat. While he's left the Democratic side, there's still parts of him that probably are insulted by this, as is the case with many Americans. So I'm not saying he's doing God's work by taking on Trump, because a lot of this is just ego. You know, Trump didn't do exactly what Elon wanted him to do, and vice versa. So this is the basis of the falling out. But that's the background, and it's going to be very nasty and very harmful to both men.
And we're only halfway through the first year of Trump's, if that, of Trump's presidency. Elon Musk doesn't seem like he's going to go away or get quiet over this. Could we see Elon just kind of hampering and attacking the Trump campaign now until the end of Trump's term?
Oh, I don't see why not. I think he might become the official opposition, to use a parliamentary phrase, within the existing Republican Party. But don't forget that he is threatening that if the big, beautiful bill is passed by Trump, he will try and launch a new political party, which will break up the Republican Party and enable the Democrats, I guess, if they get their act together. He wants to call it the America Party or the American Party, and he wants to appeal to the middle of the road American from left and right. This is what he's thinking, and obviously he would head it or bankroll it. He's also threatening punishments if the bill passes, and that would be punishments, and he will primary any Republicans that voted for the bill in the next election cycle, which is the midterms. And so he's talking about punishment and a severe threat to the base of the Republican Party.
And Diane, you've been watching American politics for a long time now. There have been a lot of people who've tried to crack the US two-party system. Is Elon Musk realistic in his thinking that he could be the one that actually achieves that?
Well, he can crack it, but he can't necessarily get the result he wants. He's doing exactly what a guy named Ross Perot, who was also a tech billionaire, did years ago. And what he did was he divided the vote, and he came up the middle, but he grabbed 20%, and that made it. He became a spoiler for the party that was in the lead, that was the one he was most sympathetic to. So it may come back and bite Musk in the face, whatever he does, but it will certainly jiggle the whole situation. And frankly, I think the two-party system is kind of, it needs a shakeup, and I don't think it served America very well. I kind of like the parliamentary system where you call a spade a spade. If you're a libertarian, you're in the Libertarian Party. If you're a racist, you're in the whatever party, and so on and so forth. At least you know where these people are coming from, and then whoever gets number one has to form a coalition, make everybody get along. Here in the United States, it's just a slugfest.
And as you mentioned there as well, Elon's also threatened to go after US representatives who back Trump's bill. Aside from setting up a party, just in going after these representatives, does Elon have the political heft to sway an election in that way? Or is it just his money that Trump and other political parties have been after?
It's about money, but it's also about mind share. He owns he bought Twitter. He's got an enormous audience. And of course, he, like Trump, attracts media attention like flies to what. And so these guys are just megaphones. And now they're beating each other up. And I don't think he can topple the system. Elon Musk can't topple the system. And the other thing is that no matter what you think of Trump, he has served in public life. He has built a business. Yes, he's erratic in his decision making, but he's pretty steady Eddie in his personal life and in what he believes in, whereas Musk is all over the map.
And do you think Musk will actually now be worried about the possibility of being deported back to South Africa, as Trump has put it?
Well, I don't know. He's also got Canadian citizenship, so he can just move north if he wants to do that by virtue of his mother. So I don't know where is he going to deport him to, Canada or South Africa? The point is, the guy is an international businessman. He can operate out of his back pocket from an island in the middle of nowhere if he wants to. So it doesn't impede him. It's just, I cannot believe that Trump would even try and do that.
And, without Musk, without Doge, does that change the day-to-day runnings of Trump's team, do you think? Is there anyone willing to step into that kind of, right-hand man almost position?
Well, Doge still exists, and the guys that, at the top that Musk appointed are still there. As far as I know, they haven't quit. Basically, it's just an auditing firm. They're going in there and trying to get rid of waste and duplication and that sort of thing. He promised the earth. He only delivered a small return to the taxpayer. That was embarrassing to him and to Trump. But I think the falling out is really over the philosophy, the difference in the philosophy between being a libertarian and being a Republican. And then, of course, there's the personality stuff.
Well, elsewhere in the world, there's a lot more going on. The war in Ukraine continues, and you've been writing in your Substack this week about a possible sort of about turn from Trump on Ukraine. At the NATO summit, his language seems to have shifted a little. What does that mean for Putin's invasion, do you think?
Well, I called it a pivot. He's not exactly, gone from one side to the other, but the fact that he won what he wanted to do, and that was to make NATO pay for itself properly and to gear up against Russia and any other threats, made him less combative. He won. He won. I mean, nobody else was pushing for this. And, the laggards now have to pony up. And that takes pressure off the United States, but also makes the world safer because Russia now faces a well-financed Europe that's united in facing the threat that they now all recognize exists, and that is they've got to help Ukraine because they're next, and Russia doesn't give up. So I saw a difference in tone. I saw a difference in attitude toward Putin. He vocalized publicly for the first time. Instead of being obsequious, he said he was difficult. He said he was odd. He said the whole thing took longer than before. And then, on the other hand, he had nothing but praise for Zelensky, who he beat up in the Oval Office, which we've talked about, and has said nothing but nasty things about. So you see him changing. And I think that psychological change was because he no longer has to be solely in charge of the whole thing, and he's handed off the responsibility for Russia mostly to Europe now. And that, I think, made him more statesmanlike.
And is there something to be said there for, as you might term it, sort of Trump wrangling? This idea that if you need something out of Trump, you've got to give him some sort of political victory first. Is that kind of what seems to have gone on at this summit?
100%. Not only has he walked away with a legacy win, if you like, this is the guy who hectored Europe into doing the right thing, and he deserves credit for that. But the other thing is that, of course, now what he's also done at the same time is he's negotiating tariffs with the European Union. He's already done a deal with the UK, but he's negotiating tariffs with everybody. But the European Union is critical, and now because this deal because Europe has now agreed to meet its NATO commitments, it's going to have to spend $1 trillion or something in the next 10 years buying weapons and equipment and intelligence, and most of that's going to come from the US. So that alone, that commitment will probably mean, they'll build their own military industrial complex, but they're mostly going to buy that stuff from the United States. So the deficit that the United States in trade has, as well as a military deficit with Europe, is going to vanish over coming years. And that is a very, very big political victory and economic victory for the United States.
And you wrote as well in your Substack about Alexis Grinkovich, which is Trump's pick for the commander of US forces in Europe. An interesting pick, right?
Very interesting. And, he's interesting because he's of Belarusian descent. So he's, like a Ukrainian, he's Slavic. So he obviously has been invested and interested and is knowledgeable about that region, which is unlike most of the generals and the politicians that have been involved in the Ukrainian struggle. He also went through a Senate confirmation hearing, and he said bluntly, completely contradicting Trump's narrative borrowed from Putin, that Ukraine can win this war. because their homeland is threatened, and they're going to be fighting like nobody else has fought, and we've seen that. So that was a policy shift in the mind of the guy who's going to be in charge of the American troops and will be the advisor to Pentagon in terms of military aid and support for Ukraine. I think it was a major shift. But one man does not make a complete shift. But I think it's an indication of the change now in the attitude by the American regime.
And we talk about changes in attitudes. You spoke just then about the meeting with Zelensky and Trump at the NATO summit. There's a big change there, wasn't there? I mean, even in recent weeks, Trump had been kind of saying this war isn't my fault; it's Biden's fault. Zelensky handled it wrong. The usual stuff we've been hearing as far back as the campaign for the election. But that relationship has really warmed up just in that last week and that summit, hasn't it?
Well, it really did. And he couldn't have been more praiseworthy of Zelensky and more, I think, concerned about what's befallen the Ukrainian people. He had a very warm exchange with a Ukrainian journalist at a press conference. It brings tears to your eyes. He softened. He was interested in her plight, her family being broken up, her husband at the front line. I mean, there's a new, gentler, kinder attitude on the part of Trump, who now sees Ukrainians as allies and not pains in the neck who just want money. And so I think that is a Rubicon psychologically that will make a difference. And I think the other thing that's happened is I think Putin has played him, and I think he's finally realizing it, because Trump has tried to make a deal to stop the war, and Putin has done nothing but escalate and kill more babies and women and civilians in Ukraine. And 3 days after the NATO summit ended, he did it again, and he fired off the biggest assault on Ukrainian people, homes, schools, everything, and civilians that he's ever done in this war. So I think we were at a very interesting and treacherous point vis-a-vis the US, Ukraine, and Russia.
Well, speaking to Times Radio earlier this week, Ukrainian Strategic Industries advisor Yuri Sak said he was confident Trump might be coming back around to the idea of these third-party sanctions on Russia. Interestingly enough, after a weekend of golf with Lindsey Graham over in the US, do you think it's likely that Trump could be willing to make some sort of action here to put more pressure on Putin?
I think that just may happen, and I've speculated about that. Graham's bill is brilliant, and it's a tariff bill, and it would give a 500% tariff on everybody who buys oil from Russia, and that will shut down their cash flow, and that'll shut down their war capability. And that's also a big threat and has upset all of their buddies like China and India, Hungary, Serbia, all these countries that, despite the atrocities of the war, continue to buy cheap oil from Russia, and that's against the sanctions. So yes, I think he's going to really consider. He's going to certainly threaten that, and that's something he hasn't done. And I think Graham's bill is brilliant.
We have heard some of that kind of threatening language before, though. Trump gave Putin that 2-week warning, which passed without consequence. There was other stuff going on in the world, but is there anyone else we should watch in the Trump camp who might be willing to push this through, or is there anything we should look at from Trump himself that could make it different this time?
I think it's going to be Trump himself. I think Trump is thinking about the fact that since his 2-week deadline passed weeks ago, Putin has done nothing but thumb his nose and escalate the attacks. The attacks are becoming more and more awful. And I think at some point, he's just going to, and he's probably he also had a war to deal with Iran, but, he also, I think will start to concentrate his efforts on how to stop that war, whatever it takes.
And as you mentioned, we did see Trump say he'd look into sending more Patriot missiles or batteries to help in Ukraine's air defense. But we've seen Russian bombings only intensify in recent weeks. They're largely using those domestically made now Shahed drones, which aren't great targets for Patriot missiles. What more needs to be sent, or is there anyone else who needs to step up here to help support Ukraine?
Well, they need air cover. They need to make their skies safe. I think that's the number one priority. The number two priority is to get even more weaponry from the United States and Europe to battle Russia at the front. It's a bit of a stalemate, but Ukraine is being exceedingly successful with their special ops at penetrating and bombing facilities, military and strategic facilities deeply inside Russia. So those things have to continue and have to be encouraged and have to be supported and subsidized. That's absolutely true. So Trump has got to escalate.
What do you think the Kremlin are going to be making of the last week's worth of international affairs that we've seen Trump involved in? Are they at this point now going to actually be a bit more worried about what the Americans are going to do, and also the Europeans, seeing as they may well have put their money where their mouth is?
Well, I think that Putin has played Trump and knows the beast, knows that he's erratic, knows he can change his mind, knows he loses focus easily. This is not a man with a huge attention span or, necessarily a very deep moral concern about what's going on. So, he's going to continue to test. And he just did. 3 days after the NATO thing, he just slammed Ukraine. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. But there will come a point where Trump will realize he's not just being defied, he's being humiliated and embarrassed. And I think you don't want to get that guy upset.
Well, Diane Francis, editor at large with the National Post newspaper and author of that best-selling Substack, thank you very much for joining me today on the Trump Report.
You're welcome.